Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. On the last two episodes of this type of challenge video, we had two beefy single targets to beat up. The first being a 2 million hit point Primo Geofish app, and the second being a 1.3 million two-phase boss fight, the Maguu Kenki. Well, today's challenge will be against two generally flimsy ruin guards, at least to an entire team. So instead of one-shotting them with a full team, we'll be taking a look at how 16 different characters' solo damage output performs in a two-target situation in the current Abyss 12-3-1. Although we are currently suffering from the PR nightmare of Genshin Impact's first anniversary, let's take a step back for 20 or so minutes to once again abuse the various volunteers of Teyvat. But really quick, it's time to pay some bills, and I'm not sure if you remember them, but it's Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends has millions of players and is available on both mobile and PC. Click on the link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen to get started with Raid. Do you like elves? That's a dumb question because everyone loves elves. In Teleria, there are two types of elves. About 700 years ago, Sephiroth tempted some of the high elves with art and philosophy. When the Arbiter found out some of her elves were learning art and philosophy, she begged them to stop. Many of those elves said no, and that's where the Dark Elves were born. War broke out and the High Elves won. The Dark Elves are like a legion of evil assassins and warlocks, and who doesn't love a good bad guy? Check out some of these awesome Dark Elf champions like Ray, Folly, the creepy looking Astrolith, and my personal favorite, Queen Eva. And did you know the fastest way to level up your champions is through farming the campaign? You can grind loads of EXP and silver all at the same time. And this month, Raid's got a non-stop schedule of special events, including a jam-packed Halloween lineup towards the end of the month. Huge rewards, huge tournaments, and huge special fragment events to get some brand new legendary champions. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan the QR code right here. New players will get an epic hero, Chinoru, who is amazing in Doom Tower, 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. You will find your rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. I wanted to thank all of you for your support and Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Today's volunteers will be Wall-E and Bender, two friendly local robots trapped in the purgatory of an abyss chamber. For this video, we will be focusing on a character's ability to murder two innocent robots. Since the last two challenge videos of this variety focused on single target boss fights, the current Abyss 12-3-1 is a great opportunity to see how good our favorite characters are against two separate targets. Now, why am I focusing on a single character's damage output? Well, if we bring a full team, this is what happens. Rust in peace, my robot friends. Pretty much any top tier character can insta-glib this chamber with a full team. I only bother doing this with two teams though because these are the current fastest two teams for speedrunning this chamber. Ayaka and Hu Tao hold the current fastest time at the high end of 3 seconds, without any support, which is, by the way, the fastest time any Abyss 12 chamber has ever been cleared to this date. Meanwhile, Raiden can do this the second fastest, with a full team in the high end of 4 seconds. So yeah, sadly, once we factor in a full team, this chamber becomes completely trivial for whale speedrunners. However, if we look at a character's solo damage area of effect output, that's when things get much more interesting. The next thing is that instead of focusing entirely on the clear time, I wanted to focus on clear time tiers. The reasoning for this is similar to the last video. All characters will have variance in how quickly they clear this chamber, especially given the limited amount of runs I did for each character and given the differing levels of quality in artifacts and talents. As such, tiers give a better general idea of roughly where a character falls in comparison to the others. The tiers for this challenge are SS tier for times under 16 seconds, S tier for times between 16 and 22 seconds, A tier for times between 23 and 30 seconds, and finally B tier for times greater than 30 seconds. Now let's talk about the restrictions in this challenge. Zhongli will be used if he allows a character to much more easily focus on doing damage. I did not want this to be entirely about dodging attacks. Although he does provide resistance shred, Zhongli does take take up valuable screen time as well. Cards and resonances are used to attempt to balance character stats in comparison to the others through their damage potentials. Some characters have much higher damage potentials than others in this video, so please keep that in mind. I do each of these runs many times and generally spend around 30 minutes on each character. So yes, I spent well over 8 hours honestly beating up these two robots with a whole slew of characters. And now for everyone's favorite part of the video, the disclaimers. Most of these times are done at my level of investment into these characters and at my level of problem solving and skill. This means that barring a couple exceptions, all of these characters are Constellation 6 with refinement 5 weapons and their talents are all very well leveled. I spent between 30 minutes to an hour on each character so as not to grind infinitely just to save 1 or 2 seconds. Keep in mind that all the times in this video can be improved upon, and this is simply one point of reference. There are most certainly oversights, execution errors, and more. Just because character A performs better than character B in this specific scenario does not mean character A is better than character B. Please take everything with a giant grain of salt. So get ready for plenty of robot entrails, as well as some surprising and not so surprising results, while we dive into the third installment of this type of challenge video. We're gonna start off, as we often do, with the original Genshin live-action role-player Diluc, aka the Mondstadt Batman LARPer. With Pyro Resonance and Geo Resonance, our good boy Diluc is at 88% of his damage potential for raw pyro damage. Now I tried a lot of different rotations, but in the end, the best times were all with EN4 for my Constellation 6 Diluc. A really interesting thing about Diluc is that his N2 and N4 have almost no horizontal area of effect, thus making them a poor choice for cleaving both of these robots. With some fantabulous RNG, these robots were clobbered in a respectable 29.28 seconds, thus landing our favorite Batman LARPer in the A tier. And what better way to follow up one of the perceived OG OP characters with one of the perceived OG useless characters, Bennett. Fun fact, Bennett was considered useless when the game came out. Oh, how times have changed. Well, let's see how the unluckiest boy performs in this challenge. Comically enough, thanks to his Constellation 6, he is able to activate the Mist Splitter's passive reliably, thus providing him with a total of 80% bonus damage. Each of Bennett's tap-E's are doing 40,000 damage, and they have a stunningly low 2-second cooldown. And by weaving a charge attack in between each tap-E, you can just see the robot's HP bars melt away. In the end, Bennett was able to clear this in 22.17 seconds. This squeaks Bennett into the S tier for this challenge. The next character we're going to take a look at is Ganyu. The residential goat who choked a monster to death on her waistline has no need for the Geo Archon shield, and is instead running Cryo and Pyro Resonance. With her AOE burst, and her AOE taunt, and her AOE charge shots, Ganyu crushed poor Bender and Wally faster than you can say something that takes longer than 15.5 seconds to say, thus landing her in the SS tier. Now we have a contestant who is sadly neglected in my last video, Keqing. And for those that might be wondering why Keqing wasn't in the last video against the Maguu Kenki, it's because of my Constellation 6 Bennett. Anyway, since she's doing solo damage output in this situation, Bennett is obviously a non-issue. A character like Keqing definitely enjoys the nice comfy shield that Zhongli provides, and thus she can focus on spamming her charge attacks, which have a fair amount of AoE. Much to my pleasant surprise, Keqing short-circuited our two friendly robots in an impressive 21.38 seconds, and her hard work earned her her S-tier placement. And who could be better to segue to than the next contestant, the Electro Archon herself, the Raiden Shogun. The Raiden Shogun's situation is interesting. Since Resolve builds a lot of damage for her, I decided to include 2 runs for Raiden, one without any Resolve and one with Resolve. Starting off with the run with no Resolve. Sadly, Raiden is unable to take out both the robots before her burst ends. This unfortunately leads her to needing to wait until her burst cooldown is done in order to do her burst a second time, thus leading to a 24-second clear time and placing a no Resolve Raiden in the A tier. But what if we provide Raiden with a reasonable amount of Resolve? By using Yanfei's burst and Razor's burst to provide Raiden with some Resolve, Raiden is then able to cleanly one-cycle them, leading to a much more impressive 12.25 second clear time and thus placing Resolve Raiden in the SS tier. So many a Xiao player has been disgruntled over the single target nature of the previous 2 this type of challenge videos. Well, we finally have a situation in one of my this type of challenge videos that's ideal for Xiao. We have 2 very slow, very tanky targets with the same amount of HP that also like to stand right next to each other and slowly try to follow you. As specific as that sounds, this is the ideal situation for Constellation 6 Xiao. As such, I enlisted the help of one of the best Constellation 6 Xiao players in Genshin Impact, Shintenzu. Now I must say, I really respect Shintenzu. I personally did not get Constellation 6 Xiao because of how janky it looked. These clips were provided courtesy of Mr. 89, a friend of mine, who also has a Constellation 6 Xiao. Did you want to repeatedly dash through both robots? Well, how would you like a one-way ticket to the opposite side of the map? Did you need 2 targets to activate Constellation 6? Well, how about this other ticket to one dead robot while the other robot is very much healthy and alive? Anyway, going back to Shintenzu Xiao. Shintenzu dealt with this for 2 hours to get this glorious clip, where all the stars and the robots finally aligned. Xiao managed to the robots to death. Aligning 13 of Xiao's E's perfectly is nothing short of an art form, so let's give Shintenzu a massive round of applause for pulling this off. Shintenzu Xiao was able to soar past the competition so far with a blistering time of 10.9 seconds, thus handily being the fastest clear time so far and easily placing Xiao in the SS tier. Go check out Shintenzu's YouTube channel for top tier Xiao play. Link to it will be in the description below. Let's move on to the other guest speedrunner today, Mr. 89. As of late, I've been deferring my Eula runs to Mr. 89 since his Eula has quite a bit more crit rate and crit damage than mine does. Now it's super important to keep in mind that these robots have a monstrous 70% physical resistance, so Eula has a massive disadvantage against Bender and Wally. Despite that, Eula's comically broken kit one-shotted both the robots in 12.07 seconds. This earns Eula, even against these robots that hugely resist her, a clean SS rank placement. The next contestant is the very neglected child arsonist, especially by her mother, the Spark Knight, Klee. Grandpa Zhongli will instead be taking little old Klee out to play with her 2 toy robots. For this fight, I placed Zhongli's pillar in front of him. Oftentimes when Klee uses her Jumpy Dumpties against targets that move towards her, the Dumpties jumpy past the enemy, thus wasting most of their damage. However, when thrown on Zhongli's pillar, they handily get stuck on it and bounce on it, and thus end up damaging both of Klee's toy robots with much more efficiency. Then, with her steady and consistent charge attack damage, as well as a couple of C4s, Klee cleaned up her robot toys in 25.3 seconds, fast enough so that Jean doesn't have to mom her and tell her to put her toys away. This places our favorite neglected child arsonist in the A tier. So who better to follow in Klee's footsteps than another pyromaniac and explosives manufacturer, Yoimiya. Yoimiya has a heavy focus on single target damage, so let's see how she fares in a situation against 2 targets. Yoimiya opens up this fight by doing a ton of damage to a single robot to get the energy needed to cast her burst. Then with the help of Zhongli and his pillars activating her burst, she is not only able to do a modest amount of AOE damage, but she's also able to shave off a few seconds from her E cooldown, thanks to her Constellation 4. This allows her to get her E back up and then to continuously deliver arrows to the knees of our poor robot volunteers. In a somewhat surprising 26.2 seconds, Yoimiya was able to send Bender and Wally to the scrap heap and land herself comfortably in the A tier. And the pyro train just doesn't stop. Our next pyro contestant is none other than the whimsical prankster, Hu Tao. Now it's important to note that my Constellation 6 Hu Tao's Shimenawa's build, even with 3 beneficial cards, is at a paltry 74.26% damage potential. My Hu Tao has by far the lowest damage potential in today's competition. Nonetheless, let's see how she fares. Hu Tao's N1 and N3 has some AOE potential, with N1 and N3 having substantial horizontal hitboxes. Combined with some lucky RNG for her charge attacks to hit both robots and then finishing them off with her burst, Hu Tao is basically able to one-cycle both these robots even at just 74% of her damage potential. After an impressive 14.03 seconds clear time, Hu Tao convincingly earned her placement in the SS tier. Now for the one you've all likely been waiting for, Ayaka. Ayaka has graced Genshin Impact with one of the most broken Q buttons in the game. By simply pressing a single key on your keyboard, Ayaka somehow throws out thousands of percent of cryo damage. Let's see how fast Ayaka can freeze our robot friends to death. 7.98 seconds. This run surpasses even Shintenzu's Xiao run from earlier. This is an amazing environment for Ayaka to shine. This time is so remarkable for a solo character clear time that Ayaka deserves the newly added SSS tier just for her. And what better way to follow up Ayaka's stellar performance than with Kokomi? Let's take a look at how our favorite mermaid military strategist LARPer performs here. Well, sadly her normal attacks don't have the greatest AoE, but unsadly they still do have some AoE. Some of her normal attacks do indeed do some splash damage. Now, I'm not sure what else to say about Kokomi during what feels like an eternity for this fight, so let's just watch her do her thing. After an agonizingly long 33.63 seconds, Kokomi was able to wash away both the robots and thus earned her the earlier defined B tier placement. Since Kokomi is the only one in this tier, I'm gonna change this to the K tier. K for Kokomi. And last but not least, for the 5-star DPS characters, we have another really wet character, Child. I rarely talk about Child on my channel, and when I do, it's usually to abuse him. No, this is not child abuse, this is a full-grown man named Child abuse. Despite Child being one of my personally least favorite characters entirely due to salt and lore, I try my best to properly use him. Child's melee attacks and riptides rip through these ripped hunks of metal, like a water dagger through robots. Thanks to the substantial AoE of his melee attacks and his riptides, Child is able to short-circuit both of these robots in an impressive 20.87 seconds, earning him a wonderful and well-deserved S-rank placement. So now that we've gone through all the popular 5-star DPS characters, let's not forget about some of the popular 4-star sub-DPS characters. We'll take a look at how Beidou, Rosaria, and Xiangling perform here. Now I'll let each of their runs play in the background while I provide some more insight to all these runs. First of all, I'm not going to lump Beidou, Rosaria, and Xiangling in the same tiering system as the other contestants. This is because these three characters are all off-field sub-DPS characters, and despite that, you'll see that their times are quite competitive to on-field characters like Diluc and Kokomi, with all their times ranging from 30 to 35 seconds. This is very impressive, given that these are all 4-star characters, and they generally are not used as on-field main DPS characters. Now looking at this full chart, the most surprising placements to me personally were Child, Keqing, and especially Bennett. Now please don't look at these results and think, well, Bennett is a better DPS than Diluc or Klee, because the reality is, Diluc or Klee with Bennett's buff is likely to do much better than Bennett with Bennett's buff, if that makes sense. Child and Keqing also surprised me here, but I guess in retrospect this fight is also an ideal situation for them, being 2 targets for Child to constantly riptide, and also by being unknockable targets that Keqing can charge attack spam against. Another interesting character is Raiden, who suffered tremendously when she didn't have any resolve, not being able to hit the damage threshold needed to one-cycle the robots with no resolve. And lastly, Xiao's time here, in comparison to all the other broken 5-star DPS waifus, is very impressive. Not since his release have we seen him competitive to this degree in most situations, so it's nice to see him shine in this specific challenge. So what do you think about the results of this challenge? Which characters stood out to you? Whose time do you think can be improved the most without going into comically high damage potentials? As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.